My name's Brandon and this is Nickelodeon Video Game History, a show where I take a look back on all of the video games based on Nickelodeon shows and retrospectively review them. After the runaway success of the first Rugrats film, Nickelodeon decided they'd go back for seconds. Going bigger and bolder for the sequel, the kids were sent to a brand new country when Rugrats in Paris was released on November 17, 2000, grossing over $103 million at the box office. With the Rugrats merchandise machine in overdrive, it also meant a sequel to the Rugrats movie game was coming, but this time they expanded their horizons a bit. Rugrats in Paris, the movie, was released not only for the Game Boy Color, but also the PlayStation 1, Nintendo 64 and PC. The handheld, home console and PC versions were all completely unique, which means I'll be covering them separately within this video, minus the PC version because getting those games to run on modern hardware is hard as balls most of the time. The release dates for these games were staggered, rather than releasing them all at once, and in general, it's just really strange. On October 29, the PS1 version was released into the wild. You'll notice that this date is about half a month before the film came out. Then, on November 12, the Nintendo 64 version, which was exactly the same as the PS1 version as far as I can tell, was made available. The Game Boy Color game would then release on November 15, while the PC version didn't release until 2001 apparently. Interestingly, it seems a Dreamcast version was also planned at some point, but was cancelled, robbing us of a Nickelodeon game on Sega's final console. As you'd probably expect, there were 3 different developers in charge here. Taking the reins for the handheld was Software Creations, who were the developers for the previous 2 Rugrats handheld platformers. The PC version saw No Wonder as the developers, who I mentioned in my Wild Thornberrys Rambler review. These guys were pretty much Nickelodeon's go-to PC dev, but they'd also make Wild Thornberrys Animal Adventures on PS1, which I'll be reviewing quite soon. Lastly, Avalanche Software were the PS1 and Nintendo 64 developers. You probably know these guys from Disney Infinity and the upcoming Hogwarts Legacy, as well as my Ren and Stimpy Time Warp review. As I mentioned in that review, Sculptured Software, who developed that game, had 4 lead developers leave and found Avalanche Studios in 1995. They'd go on to do quite a bit of work with Nick, making the first 3 TAC games and Rugrats Royal Ransom, before striking up a partnership with Disney and then being bought by Warner Bros. In 2017. Depending on which version of the game you look at, Rugrats in Paris was either god-awful or not too bad according to critics. The Game Boy version had a 4.9 average review score, putting it in line with the reception of the past 2 handheld games. The console versions performed far better though, with the Nintendo 64 version hitting a 6.9 average and the PS1 a 6.2. So sit back, relax and enjoy the review, because I've got my Rugrats in Paris and they're going gorillas.
I don't even know what that means.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
No, it's not. It's
Gets
gross.
the people going.
We're kicking this review off with the console version, but I just wanted to point out at the top here that both of these games sort of serve as sequels to their previous games. Obviously, the handheld version is reminiscent of the games that had come before it, seeing as the same developer had returned. However, surprisingly, the console version is quite similar to Studio Tour and Search for Reptar. In Rugrats in Paris for the PS1 and Nintendo 64, you've got 2 options, Adventure Mode or a very vaguely described 2-player mode. As soon as you jump into the adventure mode, you're greeted with something new, the ability to choose which baby you want to play as. Naturally, I chose Chucky, seeing as Rugrats in Paris is all about how this little sad sack wants a mum. Despite me wanting to live out my Rugrats in Paris roleplay fantasy, this game really isn't trying to adapt the movie into a game. Instead, you're just goofing around Reptar Land. This ain't your daddy's Reptar Land though. This is Euro Reptar Land, filled with baguettes and berets and one of them long cigarette things. And if it's anything like Disneyland Paris in real life, the launch of it was a complete mess that majorly affected the operations of the parent company. Without any prior knowledge of the game, the beginning here is so awkward. You're just plonked in the middle of the park with no real direction except for a short cutscene that doesn't exactly explain anything. So I just start running around and collecting these Reptar tickets that are scattered about. Strangely, going in and out of buildings here will make the tickets respawn exactly where they were, which seems a bit silly to me. Why try and earn tickets through the proper means when you can just repeatedly do this over and over again? These red Reptar tickets are used as currency to redeem various prizes. There you go, Chucky. No need to be sad about your dead mum anymore. I've given you the gift of Reptar basketball. That's way better than having a mum. The other form of tickets here are gold tickets, which are the really important thing throughout this game. Earning 16 gold tickets will allow you to buy this helmet thing, which is your ultimate goal. How do you win gold tickets? Well, I'll touch on that more in a second, but purchasing these items with red tickets generally leads you to gaining a gold ticket when used correctly. I've been playing for not even 5 minutes and hadn't experienced any gameplay, but I was already fed up with the way Rugrats in Paris controls. It's baffling to see the basic movement control in such a clunky way. This isn't an issue that was even remotely present in Search for Reptar or Studio Tour, so I have no idea how they managed to mess it up. Once you're done sprinting around collecting garbage off the ground of this deserted theme park, you'll encounter a monorail. This takes you to 4 other sections of the park: Golf Park, Princess Theatre, Reptar Island, and Ooey Gooey World. This is where the gameplay really kicks off as you find yourself diving into more minigames, baby! Yes, that's right, we've got yet another minigame collection. What a super unique and innovative idea for a Rugrats game. Each area of the park features at least one minigame, including the main entrance area, which I initially didn't realise. Wandering around Euro Reptar Land can be extremely disorienting, which is similar to being in a giant theme park for the first time in real life, so points for unintentional accuracy there. Just playing these minigames will reward you with some more red tickets, but successfully completing them will hand you those coveted gold tickets. So we can all agree that we're sick to death of Rugrats minigame collections, right? Well, on the bright side, I guess since we have a new developer in charge, we might get some fresh minigame ideas. Nope, we're playing mini-golf for the 3rd time. Are you kidding me? By the time this game was released, there were 3 Mario Party games, featuring dozens and dozens of unique minigames. The smart thing to do would be to literally just copy some of these, but for some reason Avalanche Software don't, instead choosing to copy minigames already featured in the Rugrats series. The most offensive thing about this is that the copied minigames are worse than what we've already played. Take mini-golf for example. It might seem minor, but they've removed the par number from the screen, now forcing players to press a button and bring up an entire scorecard to see whether you're meeting the goal for the current hole. Additionally, the helpful shot indicator is completely removed and the power meter is a million times more clunky. Then you've got cool moments like the camera obscuring your view, resulting in you taking blind shots alongside just generally awful ball physics. At one point the ball was straight up refusing to go in the hole, even though I was hitting it with reasonable enough power. The ball was constantly flinging out, and this one hole actually resulted in me losing the whole thing by a single stroke. It took damn near 30 minutes to play through these 9 holes, and I had zero desire to repeat that again. Circling back to the main entrance, the minigame here is literally just the same game as Milk Squirt in Studio Tour. Then, in the Japanese themed area, there's another shooting gallery style game. Not only did they copy a minigame from a previous Rugrats game, but they also copied themselves. Continuing on through the park, you'll find a minigame that's literally just the Lunar Lander game from Studio Tour as well, rounding out the collection of minigames repeated here. The other so-called unique minigames here are all god-awful. There's Chucky Chan, where Chucky gets to fight defenseless planks of wood. Seriously, all you do here is kick the shit out of pieces of wood that don't put in any effort to fight back. Well, at least Chucky gets to take out his dead mum angst in a safe way. There's also a bumper car game which had the highest chance of being enjoyable, but it's the complete opposite. There are 3 variations of this. In one of them, you have to drive around and collect balloons, trying not to get hit as this will make you lose balloons. This particular game sucks because of how random losing balloons is. Sometimes I'll drive into somebody and their balloons will go flying, but other times I'll do the exact same thing, but I'll be penalised for it. It's just too random and frustrating. There's nothing like having 20 plus more balloons than all of the other competitors, only to have your entire score wiped in under 5 seconds. The other variations include a mode where you boringly shoot hockey pucks at enemies, and a knockoff of the Spyro ice hockey game. None of these are fun, and this silly Frenchman kept saying this line over and over again.
At least I know the alphabet. I think. At least I know the alphabet. I think. think. At least I know the alphabet. I 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 think.
The other couple of games are really scraping the bottom of the barrel. These are Whack-A-Mole and Skee-Ball. Way to really think outside of the box, guys. Once you've played through all of the mini-games, you still won't have enough gold tickets to move on, meaning you'll have to purchase some of the items at the gift shop I mentioned at the start of the review. Unfortunately, it seems some of these items don't result in gold tickets, which means you've wasted your red tickets for nothing. The first item I bought was this telescope thing. I went to the spot on the ground with the corresponding image, selected the item, and was rewarded with a picture of Kimmy. As far as I could tell, all this item did was allow me to view half a dozen images. Glad I wasted a bunch of tickets on this. A lot of the minigames are ridiculously hard for a kids game on the medium setting, and none of them were fun enough for me to want to try again after losing. Additionally, I had zero interest in grinding red tickets so I could buy up more items. Nothing in this game even remotely can motivate you to do all that menial work. Getting 16 gold tickets takes you to the Reptar v Robo-Snail fight as a finale, but I guess I'll never experience that. I think the one saving grace for Rugrats in Paris is the visuals. The in-game graphics are really solid, especially when up-res to HD textures. The cutscenes utilise a bit of a different art style compared to what's been previously seen, but I think their models are actually really good for a PS1 game. This game gave me early PS2 game vibes, so I'm surprised it wasn't on that console. The PS2 released on October 26, 2000, 3 days before this game launched on PS1. It seems insane to me that they didn't push it onto that console. There were only 22 PS2 games available at launch, with most of them being god-awful. Not only would Rugrats in Paris have fit in with that lineup, but I'm sure it would have sold like crazy there. So yeah, I absolutely hated my time with Rugrats in Paris on the PS1. It's just a clunkier, more uninspired version of the Rugrats games that have come before it. This game is like when you cheat on a test by getting the answers beforehand, but getting 100% on the test would make it too obvious you cheated, so you deliberately get a few answers wrong. In Avalanche Software's case, it's like they took these answers that Studio Tour and Search for Reptar had already provided on how to make a successful game in this style, translated them to Mandarin and back to English again via Google Translate, and then wrote those answers down. In some ways, Rugrats in Paris resembles those games, but it's an awful bastardization of it overall. Maybe the handheld version will be better. Software Creations are taking another crack at getting a Rugrats handheld game to work well. Their previous games are notable for being gorgeous to look at, but awful in the gameplay department. Booting up the handheld version of Rugrats in Paris causes a bit of initial confusion. I'm not immediately platforming, and instead I'm in this kind of ugly overworld. I assumed this was like a Mario Bros style overworld, but the first thing I clicked on took me to more damn minigames. Some of these are 2D versions of stuff seen in the console game, while other games are completely new. At least Software Creations have the ability to come up with some new ideas. The way this game works is that you earn tickets doing those mini-games, which you can then spend on entering the side-scrolling levels. These levels are each really unique on the surface, but in reality they're all just the same thing. Sure, there's one level where Dill's flying a plane, or Tommy is apparently riding around on the Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster from Movie World on the Gold Coast, but it's all the same. Every level, much like their previous two handheld games, is all about you checking off some boxes before heading to the exit. It's always take X number of photos and head to the exit, or find X number of people before heading to the exit. I do appreciate that they varied the gameplay a whole lot more here than previously, but when there's been two whole games where the core gameplay is identical, well, no amount of fancy window dressing can compensate. It's especially hard when the actual platforming is clunky and stiff. How have they not even tried to address this major problem with their games? On the plus side, the visuals are still pretty good. The excitement of seeing a licensed game look stunning has mostly worn off by now, but I have to give them credit where credit is due. Overall, I'd say this is the worst of the handheld Rugrats games so far. At best, the gameplay is downright boring. At worst, the gameplay is downright terrible. The platforming is awful, the minigames aren't fun, the objective of every level is identical to their previous two games. The whole package is just so unappealing.
Have fun! And ride lots of rides, too! Yeah! And eat lots of...
Don't bother with either of these games. There is quite literally nothing here worth seeing. I just don't understand how we ended up with these. Avalanche Software literally had 2 good games to base their console version on, yet somehow managed to make an abomination. On the flip side, Software Creations are seemingly refusing to address any of the major, fundamental issues with their platformers. Playing these games genuinely made me angry. Please don't put yourself through the same experience. Next time will hopefully be a more positive review. I'll be looking at Nicktoons Racing. This game came out on 1,000,001 platforms, which means I'll be reviewing the Game Boy Color, PS1, and Game Boy Advance versions. The GBC version came out in October of 2000, which I didn't take into account when organising my schedule, which is why it's leapfrogged ahead of Wild Thornberry's Animal Adventures and Legend of the Lost Spatula. To make sure you catch that mega Nicktoons Racing review, hit that subscribe button.